So we're back with the review of our previous class. Um, so the characteristics of mediums that we reviewed were basically how the overall mediumship ability is actually linked to the physical body and not necessarily a moral characteristic of the medium. So there can be good mediums or be mediums that are attuned with other things, not so good. But of course, the moral evolution of the medium will be a great determinant of the quality of the work, the spiritual alignment of that medium. So what kind of spirits are getting into contact with that medium, depending on those moral characteristics. So, of course, good spirits, high elevated spirits will be wanting to work with good mediums that are morally aligned with their values and trying to do good for people. And as we're going to be discussing today a little bit about charlatanism, I think it does gives us a good idea that, of course, lower or less evolved spirits will be the ones that are working or influencing mediums that might have a lower moral value as their guidelines. So, of course, it's a lot easier to recognize good spirits and their kind of communications by going through a lot of the moral characteristics. Kardec explains deeply all about how we can actually identify the spirit's interest in what is it that they're saying, if they're saying something dubious, or if there's more than one spirit wanting to be represented and, saying different things for whatever reason. When we look at that intent, it's a lot easier to recognize those little issues. So, all in all, that's where we're at. So, charlatanism, or being deceived by a spirit saying that they are someone or something that they're not, is something that can happen in any area of life. So, of course, it's not different in mediumship, because the same way that we have good spirits that incarnate and they're pretty morally sound, they say they are who they really are, and their intentions are as clear as they are. So people who are very transparent. We have the other way around. So we have people who can really portray something and be something completely different. So in the spiritual realm, of course, spirits can recognize our thoughts, our emotions, and that's how they actually connect with us. Interestingly enough, it's easier for a spirit who is discarnate or is in the other realm of life, the other side of life, to be deceitful, because of course we cannot see them. So Kardec reminds us how these tricks and sleight of hands that can be done by incarnate people can also be done very well by spirits. And in order to be able to identify if that's happening, if someone's trying to say that they are someone that they're not, we need to have, of course, some study of the spiritual phenomena, some study of the information that spirit's trying to convey, and always use our moral values, but also our reasoning and our rational thought. So Kardec was a big adamant, and I guess spreader of rational thought being everything, and even the method that he used to collect the findings that was published in all the spiritual books that we have, the Spiritist books. What is Spiritism, the Spirit's book, the Gospel According to Spiritism, the Medium's book, Heaven and Hell. They were all confirmed. All the information was confirmed through different groups that didn't know each other, and the type of information that he collected was reviewed thoroughly. So he was, of course, a very capable observer of the spiritual phenomena, and he understood when things were not going according to plan and when information was a bit dubious. So that's the kind of approach that he recommended us to have ongoingly, which we will be discussing a little bit more now. So again, Kardec helped us understand that some very intelligent or high-level communications were not so easy to replicate. So if a spirit's coming in and the type of information they're giving us makes sense, you know, you can rationalize it, it's well thought, it has a good intention behind it. It doesn't matter necessarily how the spirit is identifying who they are. It's more necessarily the message that we're going to be looking into, and of course the intellectual abilities of that spirit, the way that they can speak about it, and you know, things do not seem improvised, or you know, those kind of communications are the hardest to replicate. So if a spirit will try to come in saying they are XYZ, they have to be able to communicate in the same level that that particular spirit would. So you can actually observe those kind of aspects of the communication already. But of course, he mentioned there's also lower level communications, or less intelligent communications or phenomena. For example, you know, raps or knocks, direct writing, mechanic writing, occultations. There's a lot of things that can be replicated, and you know, any spirit can come in and do a set of things like that and try to prove that they are someone else by doing that. And of course, if people don't know what to expect, what to ask, how to validate, I guess, identity, they could potentially be deceived. So the same way that we have so many forms of ID, I guess, when we are leaving, you know, he was trying to give us a few examples of how to confirm ID, you know, for data safety, I guess, or preservation, etc. So he said that, for example, people who are unfamiliar with Spiritism, they might suspect the good faith of mediums. So they might be more suspicious of what is this person doing, saying that they are communicating a message from XYZ. But of course, study and experience is the way to help us assure that the communication is authentic indeed. So he also mentions here again the aspect of the moral value. So what is in it for the person who are representing the spirit, so the actual medium, and what is the kind of interest that this person has in whatever they're saying. So of course, the best guarantee that the medium is a good medium would be their honorability, so their moral qualities, their complete disinterest in whatever they're communicating about is very important. So whenever there is a personal interest involved, we should be careful with why is that person passing on that specific information, right? So good advice from Kardec, as usual. We'll be discussing a little bit more about that as well when we talk about the discrepancies and the different kind of ideas, conflicting ideas when we have that kind of situation. So Kardec says that the people who are new to Spiritism and are enthusiasts or eccentrics, they would be the kind of people that would maybe avoid in-depth examination of things. And this characteristic of being so enthusiastic about it is the kind of thing that spirits that are wanting to deceive others might look for. You know, there might be going in for that person who might be so enthusiastic about things that might not double check everything. So he mentions that knowledgeable spiritists are generally on their guard against the blind enthusiasm, and they observe everything coolly and calmly. So they are actually double checking facts. They're not just, for example, receiving a suggestion from a spirit and going, oh, okay, maybe we should try this or we should do that, or just spreading information without confirmation. That's something that in Spiritist centers that have mediumship groups that are serious, we are constantly reminded of that. You know, if a spirit comes in here, they're the only ones to come and make a suggestion or bring an idea. If it's something that will likely be important for us to know, and it's true, we will see other spirits communicating about that. So it does help us getting into the, oh, hang on, who is this person? Even if it's a discarded person, right? It's just a spirit, but what do they want with whatever they are asking us to do? What is their intent, and does this make sense? So, it's always using our reasoning behind the information that we receive. So he reminds us again, all defects of humanity may be found among spirits, and cunningness and deceitfulness may also be found. So that's the other fact that we learn in Spiritism. It's not because someone has passed away back to the spiritual realm that they will become saints or they will acquire values that they didn't have, morally speaking. So people they keep their identity. So if they were spirits that were cunning and deceitful in incarnate life, when they go to the spiritual realm, they're going to continue being who they were. So people that like tricking, think about that. We all might have friends or people with different personalities. We keep our personalities when we are, back to the spiritual realm. The only thing that changes is that we don't have a physical body anymore, but our minds, the way our minds work, our personal traits, all this is exactly the same. So he reminds us here, spirits who adorn themselves with the most respectful names, so they'll present themselves as a very respectable person, or they'll be calling out favors because they say they're, someone or someone else. They might be doing that to inspire trust, and believing them without double checking if it's true would be a mistake. So checking for authenticity below every signature is what Kardec recommends us to do. So, it's not because someone will give us a communication, for example, today and say, oh, I'm Mother Teresa, I'm the spirit of Mother Teresa, and I want to spread, this message to all the different Christian groups. So you're not going to just go spread the message because, oh my God, you're so excited, it's Mother Teresa communicating. You're going to go through that communication. You're going to think, is this how Mother Teresa used to communicate? Why would she want to communicate it this way? Because most of the time, and Kardec talks about that, I think in a slide or two, but it's worthwhile mentioning it now. The spirits that are more morally evolved, the higher spirits, they do not need to use their identity most of the time, because most of the time for them, what's important is the message. It's the what is important about what I'm communicating, and they also communicate the same message in different places. So it might not be something that just comes to a spiritist center. It might come to a spiritualist center. It might be an influence, a positive influence in the thought of someone in a different, completely different current of thought. It doesn't even have to be a religious group or anything like that. So that's how the higher spirits bring about the real messages that we need to learn. So this, proof of authenticity, it is something that it's important for us to double check. But when we're dealing with the highly evolved spirits, majority of the time, they might be spirits that have lived for so long that if they wanted to use, for example, one of their identities of their ancient times with us, they maybe haven't been incarnate for such a long time. If they would say the name that they had in their, last life here as incarnates, it wouldn't even be relevant. We wouldn't even know who they are. So he mentions here that amongst those that manifest, many names don't mean anything to us. So why would they give us a name to be fixated on if they can actually spend the time that they have with us to give us the actual message and the thoughts of what we need to learn? So they might give us a name of a spirit from a same category just to validate the message that they're giving us, if it's something that's important for us. But amongst them in the spiritual realm, it's irrelevant to say I am, Maria, or I am Teresa. that's irrelevant to them. But it's important for us to think about the content of the message, the intent, all these details that I've just talked about. That's the key part. So if we need to double check, is that person who they say they are, we will be looking at the nature of the teaching. Is it a good or bad teaching? Is it worthy or unworthy of someone who are saying they are, this person? And when we ask their opinion on different people or different things that are related to the issue, we ask of them for approval of a few ideas, and of course, if they're refuting others or they're belittling others, then of course that's when you can raise a flag, because that's the characteristic of a morally uninvolved being, not someone who's evolved and is trying to work for the whole. But yeah, is it a good or bad message they're giving us? Is it a worthwhile teaching? Is it going to be good for whoever learns it? Those are the kind of questions that we need to ask. And then Kardec reminds us that when we're dealing with actually contemporary spirits, so people that we would know their names or the characteristics, or for example, if someone is communicating saying that they are the spirits of a loved one, of someone present for whatever reason, it is looking at their personalities and their characteristics, the way that they actually communicate, things that they used to do. So he mentions here, their communications would reflect their habits, their character, their language, or even their familiar quirks. So that's how people would recognize them. So if they need to, if they're not, of course, sometimes coming across in a way that people are validating who they are, they might reveal their identity through their intimate details. So they might be talking about things that only, that person that's still incarnate would know. And they willingly share that information of the people that they care about. So they're never going to refuse to provide evidence that they are who they say they are. They'll be humble about that. They'll appreciate that we are wanting to confirm that they are who they're saying they are. I think that's another important thing. Did you have anything to add, Fla?
No, not really.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Then we have the last three items, which are about contradictions. So when contradictions between different spirits or in communications, in teachings arise, how should we handle them? So Kardec reminds us that contradictions result from the nature of spirits themselves. So some of them might not be as evolved as they say they are. And this happens a lot in the spiritual world. I mean, not just in Spiritism, but in spiritualism, a lot of spirits might be just wanting to provide their personal opinion about something, or they might be willing to educate people on matters that they do not have a lot of information on. They might be just providing their actual personal opinion, which, might reflect the earthly tendencies or prejudices that they have not abandoned yet. So you can easily pinpoint if a spirit says that they're very evolved, they come from, I don't know, galaxy, alpha, beta, gamma, but they speak in a way that reflects prejudices, characteristics of earthly bound spirits, then, of course, that's not a highly evolved spirit talking. They wouldn't be showing those characteristics if they were as evolved as they say they are. So they might fabricate their own stories or theories, and especially, he highlights here, especially scientific matters or things that are explaining the origin of things. So if something was important for us to know, and this is something that we see very clearly, like across the communications between very serious mediums in Spiritism, for example, we hardly get communications, for example, from Joana de Angelis or Manuel Filomeno de Miranda through Divaldo Franco that contradict information from André Luiz, Generally, this information, it complements each other. It doesn't go against each other. So when you start getting information that, oh no, they say it's purely scientific, but no one else is bringing that knowledge, there's no other mediums or spirits bringing on that information, it could be a pure fabrication of this spirit that, maybe is not as evolved as they say they are. So if some things are not in agreement with one another, we should be careful. So that's Kardec's advice, that, a personal opinion might not necessarily be correct, or it might be correct to some degree, but they're just communicating what they know. They're not talking about the subject with a lot of, I guess, highly detailed information, because they just don't know that information. So, important for us to think about or reflect, rationalize when we're listening to spiritual information from whatever source, So trying to think about these things, like low order spirits can differ in what they say. High order spirits would never contradict one another. Why would the spirits that are, working for the progress of Earth, for example, those highly evolved spirits that are working for the good, for progressivity, why would they all say something different to us? It doesn't make any sense, does it? Because they all work together. So if there's only one spirit communicating, a bunch of information, saying, no, I have exclusive access to this information, no one else does. This is why, I'm the only one bringing it. You should be thinking, this shouldn't be true. So Kardec reminds us that a lot of people who are relatively inexperienced regarding the mysteries of the spirit world would potentially be easy to believe in this information that's provided by spirits who say something that they're not. So biggest advice here for everyone who's trying to get to know more about spirituality, spiritism, and find contradictory information. Kardec says, if two communications are radically contradictory, so if you think of the depth of the thought that it carries, and they're saying they both came from the same spirit, one of them is not going to be true. So it's just reason, right? It's just making, joining the two dots then. And then he says there's two ways that serve to settle our thoughts concerning these issues of doubtful identity. So if we don't think that that person is who they're saying they are, we first should submit the communications to severe tests of reason, common sense, and logic. So is what they're saying logical? Does this make sense? A lot of mediums, unfortunately, they start saying, no, I'm the first one to receive information from Galaxy XYZ, and this is what it is. We need to really stop and think, does this make sense? Why is this person the only one? Or is the information they're giving relevant to whatever it is that they're saying it's relevant for? Common sense and logic. Kardec was common sense reincarnated. So, of course, all the good spirits give the same recommendation, which is make sure that you can test it with reason, common sense, and logic. If you ask about the logic of the sense or something like that you're not really sure about, if you ask a spirit that is highly evolved about that, if you make a serious examination, they will provide more details. They'll help things make sense. If they don't, we shouldn't just blindly believe it, and when someone is trying to be deceitful, they would avoid discussion and they want to be blindly believed. So a high spirit would never be, let's say, angry, upset about being questioned. They will always help with serious examination if we ask for. The second criteria that he mentions is if the true identity of the spirit lies in agreement of the teaching. So, like I was saying before, when some truths need to be learned by our humankind, some principles, And the principles and the messages are definitely the most important part of the communications, like we said before. So different spirits and different mediums who do not know each other and are not under the same influence will definitely have that information. And then we can look into that information and think if it really entails more truth. And Kardec said that it will be generally more truthful if it's coming from more than one source. And if there's just one source that contradicts the majority, then that's it. We can see that maybe the issue is with that particular source. So those are the main bits that Kardec has given us in terms of trying to determine if something was true or not and what was the source. And that's the end of this item. Did you have any questions or additions to make, Flavia?
No, I'm on. Just all years.
Good. All right, so we will wrap up with this session, and our next session on this study will be on next week. So Tuesday the 21st, chapter 2, we'll be reviewing elementary notions of Spiritism still. We'll start on the item 187, consequences of Spiritism, all the way up to 192 with Flavia. So thank you for today. Once again, I will stop this live and we're going to go through our final meditation. Thank you for those that could join us.
Thank you.
I will set this up. Anyone who wants to join our online meditation now through